No problem.
Hey there, brothers and sisters. Welcome to Esoteric Psi, the podcast and institution where we strengthen and increase the consciousness of our community through starting a dialogue of psychology, esoteric wisdom, and spirituality in a practical way that you can apply to your everyday life. Sorry, I had to read that. My name is Whitney, and I am co-hosting today's episode. I'm a massage therapist and a student of realized medicine and other various things that I try to learn. And I'm here today with my opposite co-host, Dr. Alex. I'm going to pass to you.
Hey, Whitney. You did a great job, and I appreciate it. I know it's stepping outside your comfort zone, and I appreciate you stepping outside of that. My name is Dr. Alex Soldano. I am a therapist. I started as a medical doctor, and now I do other forms of therapy. And we have with us today Vlad again. Vlad is psychic medium, spiritual healer, energy healer, a whole bunch of different things. He essentially coined and started the branch of medicine called realized medicine, where the therapist begins by becoming realized, which is essentially taking hold of your life and work on yourself, and therefore, by extent, working on other people. He started getting these abilities at the age of 12, and he's, through interacting with both physical and non-physical teachers, he's built everything he's built today. And Vlad, how are you today?
Really well.
I think it's a little bit egocentric of me to introduce you, and maybe not let you introduce yourself. But how's your day been? Because I think we have a very interesting topic today.
My day started early.
Now, I figured that you were always giving me and Whitney and everyone such a great advice on couples, on your other half. I figured we'd talk a little bit about that today. What the point of having a spouse, a significant other, a boyfriend, girlfriend, wife.
What's
that
the
is
point? Bill Maher said, why have a wife if you have a life? Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
So what do you think, Vlad? Why do we come into this world kind of like needing or with the structure? Because there are societies, there are polygamists that don't have a specific one-on-one relationship. Why is monogamy such a structural part of the human experience, specifically in our society?
I have to give a disclaimer on this one because people are going to watch it and laugh. Because I have 5 kids from 3 different women, so I mean, I can only tell you I'm an expert in a relationship because I've fallen on my face so many times. And
Can I interject something here?
Yeah, of course.
I was really pondering this morning because I went back and rewatched our episodes just to try to refine how I do this. But it occurred to me wow, there really is this need that people have for the person that they're taking advice from to be perfect. They're seeking perfection before they'll listen to anybody. And one of the things that I always appreciated about you as my teacher was that no matter what I've done, okay, I can come to you and say I had this thought or I did this wild ass thing. And you're never going to be well, I have no idea what that feels like to think that way. There's never anything that I'm going to come to you and say, and you're going to be that is too far, because you've experienced so many things that there's not a depth that I could go where you're not going to be able to relate to what that is like.
I really appreciate that. I really think that it's important. I always wanted to be taught that way. I look at the people that I've been taught by, or the people that have contributed to my understanding, like Resnick, like Epstein, like my parents. I didn't have a role model family. They're all wonderful people, and they happen to be all my parents. I got blessed with 3 parents: my father, my mother, and Resnick. But I learned about the importance way much later in life, the importance of having someone consistent, and someone that you can surrender into. I've tried numerous times to make that happen. You're in the shower. And I see Alex getting nervous because she's in the shower. So,
Oh no, that's fine. You can just move it over. Like no worries. I saw you getting distracted by her in the chat.
yeah,
So.
I know you're gonna air this. I don't know. But the point is that it's not, you can't find the value of having a counterpart until you come to that point in your life where you've had enough. You know, we have this kind of skewed view of reality because we're bombarded by what things should look like, or people should look like, or what they should act like, and what they should be like. And so, you know, I saw this young guy came, I don't remember what, I think I went to do a wedding. I was officiating a wedding in New York. And I'm sorry if this offends anyone, but it's kind of, it just sounded so ridiculous. And I saw, not that I've ever thought like that, but I saw a part of myself in it. I spoke to this young man, he was like 25, and there was a girl that was interested in him, and he was interested in her, and they kind of had this they were doing this dance, right? And I said to him, so, you know, in our community, young people, especially religious people, meet each other at 20, 21 years old, and they've never been touched, they've never seen anyone, so they have this purity, and their nerve endings are really like raw, and when they meet someone that's there, they recognize, and it's not a arranged marriage as unorthodox would have you think, but it is very, very real and pure. So their intuition is very, you know, intense. So I said to him, I said, you know, I noticed that you're doing this dance with this young woman. And he turned to me and he said, she was incredibly beautiful and super smart and just really had presence. And he said, she has cankles. You're a goddamn fool. You're just a fool. You know, I wanted to smack him. But that's where, you know, that's how young people gauge who they want to be with. You know, that young men start out thinking that their counterpart, or their woman, or their wife has to have some certain kind of look, until you realize it's not a look that keeps you, it's the love that keeps you, right? And so you want the real person. It's great that they are adorable and loving and fine and diligent and all of those things. You know, you can make a checklist. But I found that it's important to be able to surrender to the other person. And I spent a lot of time looking, and ultimately, even though I've been around, you know, since I've been dating officially, I actually never dated, but I've been interacting with women since I'm 18 years old. I never gave myself a chance to surrender, to actually be with someone that I could surrender to, until I got married. Now, this second time. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. I went to Vietnam from California, but I can tell you that it's very important. Men delude themselves. They think that when they're single, they're more effective because they think they can be successful and they can play. They just have this, you know, kind of vibe. They can just be available. It doesn't do anything. You can be successful when you're stable, when you're still, when you're concrete, when you're not on the prowl, when you have a method, when you have a order in your life. That's when you become successful. And many of us, including myself, you know, because I always had abilities, and no matter what environment I was in, I always deluded myself. Thinking, oh, I'm this. You know, what if there's one around the corner? Well, maybe there's always room for a new one. You know what I mean, nothing was ever permanent, and the door was always open.
Always a what if, right?
Yeah.
Quick disclaimer: Vlad never knows what topic we're gonna have until like the second I introduce it. He prefers it that way for some reason. Likes to be surprised. So
because I don't prepare. I don't need to prepare. I'm not, this isn't the preparation. You know, my claim, my blessing is that I'm able to plug in and answer realistic questions that are interwoven with practical life experience, because I've had so many life experiences. Plus, I integrate everything with godliness and with understanding.
yeah, for example, with the Enneagram, there's a lot of different personality types and stuff, right? But the Enneagram divides something up as being motivated by being by yourself, motivated by being on a one-on-one relationship, and motivated by being with a group of people, right? With the environments in which people feel most comfortable. Is there anything innate about the human condition where, for example, if you're born a man, then you feel drawn towards a specific woman, or you're a woman, a man, or for those born or homosexual or whatever they define themselves as, is there something innate about the human experience that you're looking for one other person, or is it just something that our society has taught us, like a social construct?
It's inevitable. I don't care if you're homosexual, transsexual, it doesn't matter. You need a counterpart. Everyone needs support. Everyone wants to be understood. And if you encounter someone who's on the same, who has a common denominator, it's not just the music you listen to or the town you come from, you can surrender. When you have a community, it's easier to live. I just had my family from London. It's 4 of them. My cousin, her husband, and 2 boys. It was incredible. It was just incredible. Getting up every morning together, eating together, going to pray together, training together, yoga together. It's a whole different life. You're never alone, which is great. And there, of course, there are moments where you want to be alone, which is fine. But the truth is, Alex, you can't refine yourself if you're alone. No matter where you go, you can go on a mountain in Tibet and sit in lotus and chant and pray. But there's still disturbances. There are still obstacles. There's all kinds of critters and weather conditions. And you need to be able to engage with another soul in order to be called down on your bullshit. You have to be able to constantly refine yourself and see yourself in the world. And so the way, yeah, please. Go ahead.
I just want to say, I never in my life thought I would hear you say the word critters.
Mhm.
But this is like one time we were talking about interacting with a partner or other people, and you said to me, are we okay to cuss on this? Like, I realize how frequently I cuss. Is that, Alex, do you have a problem with that? Do you? Okay.
I don't. YouTube might have a problem with it, but then we'll just put like explicit language warning and then fine.
Well, what you said to me was any motherfucker can sit on a mountain and find peace. The real task is to use these concepts in everyday life with all the people around you. And that's a Kundalini yoga thing too. Like the purpose of this yoga is to be quick and effective so that you can become a householder and interact with everybody, and you're not separating yourself from society. So I think that's this is where we're at. The new spiritual life is completely involved in like your relationships.
Right.
But one of the things that I feel like maybe Alex was trying to get to is the idea of like a single partner as opposed to like a polyamorous.
Multiple partners.
Yeah. Is that, Alex, am I misunderstanding?
That was the first question that I asked was, is there anything innate in us and is that makes us seek out one-on-one relationship more than polyamorous? Because there is this debate going on with anthropologists. Let's say, most tribal things have one partner, but there are some tribes that and it's like almost 50% of them that do polyamorous. So there is like this debate in the community, like, is there something innate in our, or is it a social construct where we search out like a one-on-one relationship?
Well,
I don't know.
anyone that's had a wife will tell you it's hard enough handling one wife. Imagine having two.
I feel like that goes for husbands also.
Of course it does. But Alex, there's two halves for everything. My father always say, there's a cover for every pot, and absolutely, it doesn't work. Multiple partners doesn't work because remember, everything is energy. So you leave your energy in that other person. You emotionally and intellectually, physically interact with them. They long for you. They think about you. They desire you. They want to be a part of your life. If you leave them and they know that you might be having other relationships, they have a feeling, so they constantly have you in their mind, in their heart, and in their mouth, meaning not physically, but they have you on their lips, meaning they talk about you because you might be doing so. That's a distraction of your spiritual energy. Having multiple partners affects you most of all, more so than them. But of course, they suffer as well.
I think David Data speaks a lot about the masculine in every person. Like we all have masculine and feminine in us, even though most guys I think would have a little bit more masculine, and most women would have a little bit more.
We lost Alex.
Yeah.
Come back. Go ahead, Ray.
I was gonna say too that I have had personal experience and like just know so many people that attempted to have a multiple partner relationship, and it is just, to me, it's like a distraction. It's like now that when I look
wives.
Yeah. Well, when I look back at it, yeah, sister wives. When I look back at it, it's like all these scenarios that to me, it's just like there's something that you're really not wanting to look at and face about yourself or your situation. And it's like this constant need to feel that high of like interaction. It's just to me, it's a distraction.
It's the newness, it's constant stimulation. I have always something to look forward to. It's much harder to have to focus on one human being and constantly find value in that.
Well, and like it's a band, when I think about my mom has lost her mind now, so I don't think it's like inappropriate I'm not shaming her, or it's not going to cause a problem with her social life for me to talk about this, but for her, it was need to find a way to feel good about herself, because the real foundational things that would give her some kind of self-value just weren't there. So it's like new partner. This makes me feel really good.
It's the newness. It's for approval. It's easy, even for people say, "Oh, I'm a practitioner." Those relationships give me the acknowledgement that I need. I really don't need a life partner. My students give me the love that I need. Well, that's not complete, because my students give me applause, accolades, and acknowledgement, and it's intermittent. They never see the real side, my life. You understand? They only see the best of me. That's why I reveal myself and talk about myself openly, because I'm not interested in secrets and hiding what I am and what I'm not. There's a very human side, and I don't need to lead with it. But if you ask me, I'll tell you. And I found that in my relationships in the past, they didn't work out, because as soon as my partner at the time found out what it's like to live with me. They want to run the other way because it's all great and fun and cool, and I don't lead with my abilities, so they don't really. It's not as if I hook people with my abilities and who I am and what I do, but then they step into the life of what it takes to be this, and 98% of the human population doesn't want to live an organized life. Not to say that I have always been organized or focused, but the truth is, it's hard to find another person, and it was hard for me wants to live this kind of life.
Was it difficult for you because you weren't ready to, like you told me one time, if you have an issue with your partner, that's a reflection of your heart's desire. So it's not that like you can't expect them to be whatever. You have to look at that issue in yourself. So is this like, were these people reflections of your ability to consistently live that way yourself?
I don't use the word reflection because it's not outside of me. It's something inside of me. So I try to use expression, and I'm a real stickler for expression. But of course, I encountered partners that were expressions of where I was at the time, as we all do, and it spoke volumes. Even my support system. You know me when I worked for our mutual acquaintance, and his situation in his marriage. I'm not going to mention names. It's important, right? Was very similar to mine. His wife is out of her mind, and she's a substance abuser, and he was constantly disturbed by her, but in turn complained about her when he was exactly the same. He was just more focused and organized, and he made a living. Well, that's my story. That was my story at the time. So it manifested as a result of where I was. It formed itself it was a support system that formed itself as a result of my situation and my arrangement or relationship at the time, that was an expression of a support system that was exactly like us. No boundaries, willy-nilly, whenever, whatever, however, everything. I can make a list, I don't have to tell you.
Well, my point is that what I like about this concept is that it removes the need to make anyone good or bad. Like it removes the need to make your partner bad for however they behave, because it is like, now I look back at my relationships that I have been in and I'm like, man, I can't even believe that I put up with that shit. But it's like, because that's what I was, I had to there was a part of me that required that type of relationship. So now I can look at it and be grateful that I had the experience, and I can see those people for the best of who they are. And I don't have to make them bad. I think that's like the big thing of this concept is like, there's no need to make your partner, whether or not they're your lifelong partner or they're a partner from the past. There's just no reason to make them all bad or all good. They're just a human.
It's part of taking responsibility and becoming realized. And that's the difference between mirror or expression.
Got it. Yeah.
I went through years, saying that my ex-wife, C.O. Lula's mom, was negative Nancy. She can ruin a wet dream. I mean, she constantly putting obstacles. We were living on a $50 million resort, driving a Ferrari to our wedding. From the resort, it's 40 miles, right? And it's a convertible Ferrari. I'm sure you heard this story before. And it's raining on both sides of the car, literally on both fields, on both sides, as we're driving from Taos to Cuesta. And she's crying. I said, "What are you crying about?" She said, "Well, it's going to rain out our wedding. Why are you worried about 40 miles from here? Look at your windshield. There's not one drop of rain, and you're in a $200,000 vehicle. Your wedding is being hosted on a 10,000 acre ranch. What's the problem?" So when I realized that I was constantly pointing my finger at her instead of recognizing that even though I had special abilities and we were great manifestors together, I was negative, worst case scenario, always looking for betrayal, reactive, self-absorbed, completely, delusional at 30, 32, 33 years old. And once I recognized that, when you recognize that, you liberate the other person. You liberate them from carrying the responsibility, because they're no longer at fault. So they're no longer taking up space in your heart or in your mind, and you can let them go. And it's important to correct it with them, so that they can be free as well, so that they're not constantly carrying that weight that they failed somehow. But Alex started this session with a question: is it important to have one partner? And I can tell you from experience, having many destroys the relationship. It doesn't shatter it, it destroys it. Even if they know each other, it destroys it. There's no boundary. If nothing is sacred, it falls apart.
Well, for example, first I want to make a comment about Kriya Yoga and how, Babaji and Lahir Masai, they were speaking about the spirituality being specifically starting out as having a family, as forming a family unit. And that's the first test. And after your children are grown and whatever, and you have had that family experience, when you're older and you're called to, go out by yourself and do stuff by yourself, that's a different part of your life where the initiate and the master can continue. But that's like the starting off point, which was contrary to what was happening at that time, where it was, okay, the holy men, the wise men, the true masters, they go off and meditate in a mountain by themselves. And that is like kind of the new shift on it, not only with Kriya Yoga, but with many schools. Like they do shift. It's been the shift of go off and do your own thing and then renounce society and everything to have your family.
Just so you know, I'm sorry to interrupt, try to remember your thought. I apologize, but this is why the Catholic Church passed a law. My former father-in-law was a Roman Catholic, told me that the Catholic Church passed a law in the 1700s because men would go through their changes in their 50s, and if they were married, they'd go off and go join a monastery and want to become priests. So the Catholic Church passed a law, all those guys that became priests, if they never divorced their wives, all the wealth when they died went to their wives. So the Catholic Church passed a law saying that you can't marry if you want to be a priest, so that the wealth would go to the church. That's an actual thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I thought I heard that story before, but thank you for reminding me of it and for letting all the listeners know. David Data speaks about the masculine and the feminine. I think I started talking about this before I cut off. And the masculine looking for freedom and the feminine looking for love and acceptance. And obviously we have both masculine and feminine in us. And what I do notice about, for example, a lot of very masculine men or maybe even very masculine women, that's something they get frustrated with when they're tied down in a relationship, like, oh, but I need my space, I need my freedom, I need everything, right? And I do find with very feminine people, either men and women, they are so obsessed with finding this love and acceptance that they don't ever really work on themselves. Do you find that is actually a test to find that balance in your life? Or do you agree with that concept of the masculine looking for freedom and the feminine looking for love and acceptance?
No.
What's your take on that?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Alex, I remember, I didn't have a moral standard. I wasn't born with one. I think I was born an outlaw. I didn't have a morality. I just did whatever I wanted, always, until I realized that there's freedom within boundaries. So masculine looking for freedom, there's freedom within, you can find freedom in confinement. There are people that are doing 25 to life. They're free. They find freedom inside. So being in a marriage, there's a certain freedom to not being on the prowl. There's a freedom to not being obsessed about your vanity and who loves you, who likes you, who doesn't like you, spending hours at a time at a gym. I stay healthy for me. I stay fit for me. I stay sane and emotionally resolved for me. But I love being in the marriage because I can surrender and I have another human being next to me that is just like me, just softer and more loving. And so I don't really subscribe to it. Plus, remember, my gauge, once I developed some boundaries and some morality, that morality came from the original text of what the Christian world calls the Old Testament. And my gauge of morality is from Torah, which says that, you know, religious people, people who live an observant life, marry in their early 20s, so that they're not distracted by their impulses, that they're not scattering themselves energetically, so that they have a common denominator with one person, and they keep that common denominator, an energetic coming together with an observance. So if I come together, you know, I came together with my ex-wife, which was really, if you think about it, definitely had to happen because I had these two incredible kids. You know, so my creative soul, my creative body brought me together with this person that also subscribed to a potpourri of different disciplines. We didn't have an allegiance to anything, but we made two incredible kids, right? But the truth is, it was destined for failure. It was destined for failure. There was no common denominator that kept us together. There was nothing that really kept us, no ritual life, no common understanding. This is where, you know, the betrayal, thou shalt not commit adultery, the commandment comes in, because I picked a young woman who was intelligent, intellectual, well-read, well-traveled, beautiful, sexy, all those physical, material things. I grew up in an Italian neighborhood. She came from an Italian family from Buffalo. We related. I spoke like her father because Bensonhurst was, you know, full of Sicilian Italians. So that's not a common denominator. That's not, ultimately, it didn't keep us together at all. And I betrayed myself because ultimately my belief system is based on understanding and faith. I know everything's going to be okay. She's constantly planning for the other shoe to drop. So I spend my life with her, constantly convincing that everything's going to be okay, which means it drags me back, you know, instead of going forward. I'm constantly in conflict with my other half, trying to convince her that we're going to be fine while we're living on a $50 million resort and supported by a billionaire, and I'm seeing 14 people a day as a practitioner. It still was never enough. Why? Because I wasn't enough for myself. So I encountered another human being who constantly demanded that nothing is never enough. So I had to take responsibility.
I can give a little anecdote. Yesterday, I said a blessing and a prayer before my wife and I had dinner for the first time ever, and we both cried. And it was just beautiful and moving because when I grew up, when people would say, "Oh, my family never prayed before eating," and with the families that did pray, I wasn't able to get into that kind of that prayer zone, that mood of thankfulness, of spiritual connectivity. And I know that I speak to God and pray often, and I know she does as well, but we never did that together before. And when we did that yesterday together, like we were both moved to tears because we got into that zone, and it was quite beautiful. I just wanted to share that.
Look, used to be a public announcement, a public service announcement by the Church of Latter-day Saints. They say a family that prays together stays together, right? It's a fact. I don't care what you say. You know, you can go to all the clubs you want and travel all you want and hang out and have common friends. Ultimately, remember, if we subscribe to the idea of souls, that two souls come together and they merge. You don't meet the one, they become the one. They become the one because you develop that spark. Yes, there has to be chemistry, there has to be a common understanding, mutual interest, and all that. But that doesn't keep you together. It becomes the one because you use whatever religion you come from, or whatever conscious understanding you come from. That's what keeps you together. The common denominator. It's the energetic flow that keeps two energetic souls together. Right? That's what really sustains you.
Well, I think there's another factor as well that kind of limits people from being able to connect in this way that you're saying. Sometimes we see the present through the lens of the past, right? And when we have been either hurt by previous relationships or parents or whatever, we bring that way of viewing reality into the present, and we're not able to enjoy that present moment. So I think sometimes that happened with religion and with order and stuff. I think the society was so hurt by just how messed up some religions were, and their childhood and their pain from people that were quote unquote religious, but they had a mess in their life. Like you mentioned in early shows, that they're running from all that because they have associated kind of religion, instruction, order to pain, to suffering, to fakeness, to whatever. And I've seen this come up many times, and it's been part of my experience as well. I never really attached, beautiful communion of spirituality, of order, of religion to a wonderful, harmonious life. Maybe some people have had that experience, but what do you think can be done to help this generation maybe come back to that a little bit more?
I think it's important for this new generation of tree huggers. And somebody wrote, I did a podcast with Resnick, and some woman who we know for 20 years used to work for Fox. She went, "Oh, I thought in yoga, we're all goddesses. I'm a goddess." Listen, what's important for the new generation to understand is that religion is vibrational. If you're a Muslim, then you should be a Muslim. And if it doesn't resonate with you, then find one that resonates with your sense of truth and be that. You cannot use different, I've used this example before, but you can't use a Galaxy charger to charge an iPhone, right? So if you're an intense person like you, Alex, you have a broad intellect, and you have drive, and you have knowledge and understanding, you need your sense of truth is really magnified. So you need a sustainable science, or a spiritual science that sustains you. It cannot be drawn from different disciplines. It doesn't serve you, because it cannot give you a concrete path in one direction. That one direction sustains you. So if you and I were on a path and there was 3 different directions, you couldn't take all 3. You'd have to take one, right? You can't split yourself in 3. Well, energetically, when people say, "Oh, well, I meditate from Buddhism, and I hang out with Sikhs, and I pray 3 times, 5 times a day with Muslims," and that's all great. That's all that inclusive nonsense is great. That's all wonderful. You can love everybody. That's fine. But the practice has to be, you have to have an allegiance to one thing, because energetically, whatever technology you use to sustain yourself, that's what feeds you. And that technology provides you with an understanding. Your conscious understanding provides you with a flow, and that flow starts to sustain you. You understand? So, what was the question was what? I forgot what you.
What can be done for this generation?
So this generation needs to realize the way religion has been presented in the past, and there are many religions, even, you can say Islam for 1400 years has converted by force, but so has Christianity and Catholicism. The Catholic Church killed 20 million Mexicans, where you're living right now. The Virgin of Guadalupe only showed up because it was an apparition, because there were dead people in the streets. because they wouldn't convert to Catholicism. They had their own understanding. They were incredibly connected. So if people stop looking at the basics of religion and look at it for its wealth of information and look at the depth and the vibrational value, then they'll see that there's value in Islam, because it brings you together. It's the devotion. I wish my people had as much devotion as Muslims do. I wish that there was, the Sikhs have this. They don't all practice Kriya Yoga, but many of them do. I wish that my people had that physical devotion to their bodies and honor their bodies as the Sikhs do, and the Hindus that do yoga. They don't have that. They're all overweight and out of shape and don't honor their bodies completely. They don't. It's not in alignment with spirituality. So today's generation needs to accept that their spirituality doesn't mean anything. Spiritual means nothing, zero. When somebody says, I had a yoga student the other day, she's a fantastic yogi, lovely young lady. I said, what do you subscribe to? Oh, I'm spiritual. Doesn't mean shit. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It means you understand the existence of spirit. That's it. You don't have a ritual life. You don't have an allegiance to anything. You don't have a practice. You don't have anything. And if you do have a practice, it's some Akashic file bullshit and some other, crystal balls and crystals and whatever it is that you think is giving you vibration. The only thing that can give you and sustain you is that which created you. And if you came to this world Catholic, then you should practice Catholicism. And if it doesn't resonate with your sense of truth, then start exploring a path that you can commit yourself to. I had a woman call years ago. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to tell the story for a moment. She's a Jewish woman who is a Tibetan Buddhist Lama. She can teach Tibetan Buddhism in Tibetan and in English. She was ordained as a Rinpoche. And I was there at her. She's a Lama. She's, I guess, a priestess. She calls me at one point and says, Vlad, I'm not feeling well. I'm not sleeping at night. I said, why do you think that is? Well, while we sleep is when the soul refuels itself, when the body, the intellect's not justifying experiences. She said, well, I think I'm trying to keep the world awake. I said, whatever you want to tell yourself. Are you interested in my version? She said, sure. I said, you don't sleep because throughout the day, whatever technology you're using, the energetic flow is not providing for you so that you can rest at night, so that you can be properly exhausted by it. It provides, but it also exhausts you because when you're aligned to the flow, it has order. So there's a time to sleep, there's a time to pray, there's a time for everything.
Cycles.
Right. It's an order. You have to have order. So you're not sleeping at night because whatever you're practicing, it's not sustainable. It's not giving you the peace that you need. Well, it's true. It's not that Buddhism is bad. It's fantastic. But she's not a Buddhist. It's vibrationally inappropriate for who she is. So she has no peace. That's why she can't rest. So a lot of our young people, I'm young, but people in their 20s and 30s, today's generation, they're exploring. Their parents got exhausted by the physical, material nonsense of religions for the sake of control and the lies, and everything is guilt, and everything's a sin, and everything's a problem, and God is punishing and God is rewarding. So this new generation, they have an aversion to it. They just want anything but that. Moreover, they don't want boundaries. But when they find out that these boundaries, that spiritual boundaries and morality realigns you, makes you 10 times, if not 100 times more powerful in your intention. They all want to be spiritually powerful. So one of my students said to me, well, I had visions. I said, what were the visions of? Oh, people passing by. What does that mean? You have visions? I mean, I don't want to be rude, but It doesn't mean anything. So what? You had people, you aligned yourself to your soul, and you saw people passing by. That's not a vision. It's meaningless. So the young people that don't have a sounding board and they think, oh, I'm practicing spirituality, Akashic files. They all want to be Edgar Cayce. But if they realize that, if they collect themselves from the impulsive life of many partners, which we started out with, being distracted by sexuality, which I was guilty of myself, being distracted by substance abuse, which is a pandemic in itself, depression, intellect. I mean, there are many. When they collect themselves from the impulses of the human experience as a result of order, organized understanding, and align themselves to a way, then that way will provide for them. And most importantly, provide for them a counterpart that is like-minded, that you don't have to drag into the light to convince them to have faith and trust, that have your similar pace. So if you want that in your life, then you have to live that, not talk about it. You can run your mouth about all kinds of that. I'm spiritual. It doesn't mean shit. You ain't spiritual. If your wife is dragging you down, then that's the wife you earned. You don't get what you want. You get what you are. So if your husband is bashing you and your practices, that's because you're not about your practice. You're about talking about your practice. Because she doesn't see the value of it. She can't see you. Because all you're doing is running your mouth. Go ahead, Whit.
I didn't want to interrupt. I was thinking when you were talking about this, I was thinking as a person who was atheist, like pretty adamantly atheist, one of the things that I had to do was just like humble myself enough to even listen to these kinds of conversations without just wanting to destroy them. And I think that just came from like being humbled by situations, being humbled over and over, to where it was finally like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna fucking listen so that I could just relax a little bit. But one of the things that really opened up this conversation for me was like, you'll hear all the time people don't want to pray to God. They don't want to say prayers to God. They don't want to talk. They don't want to use the names of God. So they'll say, I'm praying to the universe or whatever. And it's this like really minimized understanding of what the names of God actually mean. Like the names that we have for God are indicate that we can't even come up with a name for God, because it's this like existence that we can't even remotely comprehend with our human brains. So all of these names for God that we have are like situational, or like Hashem, which just means the name, because we can't even put it on the tip of our tongue. So if you're praying to something like that, how much more powerful is that than when you're praying to a universe? Like there's like how many universes are there? Like you're praying to this just such a minimized energy. Why would you want to like subjugate yourself to something so lowly?
Now, when you're talking about the names of God, are you speaking about it from like the 72 names of God, or from a Jewish perspective, or in general, like Allah, or
yeah,
any
whatever.
name for
I
God?
mean, I guess I'm specifically speaking of the 72 names of God. I think is more Old Testament and New Testament. That's not Torah based. Torah, I think, has less than that. Am I wrong, Vlad?
Kabbalah has 72 names.
Kabbalah does, okay. But that's really what I'm referencing, just because that's what I've studied. But I think it's applicable probably in most, at least like what do they call them? Desert religions or whatever. Like most religions that are kind of branching off of a similar story. I think it's probably
The Abrahamic religions, you mean?
Abrahamic religion. Thank you. I think it's probably similar in that the names for God have meaning for the text in which they're presented. It's like an aspect of God that you're calling on when you speak that name, but it indicates a humility before that type of energy. which is not going to be present if you're praying to the universe or something that you just accept. This is the biggest thing I can fathom, so this is what I'm going to pray to, as opposed to like, this is such a huge thing, no human can even fathom what it means. That's what I'm praying to.
Can I make a comment before Vlad comments on that? Ken Wilber has this thing called God in first, second, and third person, right? He's a philosopher. He studied all these religions. He's like, okay, trying to find the truth, the common truth that unites all of them. He said, God is first, second, and third person. So God is third person in the sense that he is everything, or she, or whatever it is, everything around us. It is second person, the fact that you can speak to it like it was, and just like I can speak to you, and you, Whitney, are expression of God in second person because I'm interacting with you, right? But God is also first person in that I'm an expression of it, and just like I'm a tentacle of it. So I think that's what people don't really have clear. And God is first, second, and third person. He is, like I am a little expression of him. He is someone that can speak to and interact with, and he is everything, or it is everything. So I think that's where people get confused. I don't know what your opinion on that is, Vlad.
Opinion? There's only one. It's not a he, it's not a she, it doesn't have a color, it doesn't have a gender, it's not a person, it's not anything you can grasp as your understanding. It is an expressive, energetic, the simplest way. I had to explain it to a 16-year-old, my nephew. He said, Dad, what can you explain it to me? I said, well, imagine that it's a generator, and all it does is generate, and it's all knowing and omnipresent. It's everywhere, and so it generates through our will and our desire. It generates form, and everything is its expression. But once you accept that there's one, people choose not to say God because they want to be politically correct, which I don't care about. They're terrified of being seen as if they're aggrandizing some masculine figure. Well, I've had people ask me, why is it in prayer? In prayer, it's God is so angry in the Psalms. God's not angry. In David's Psalms, he was constantly in his head. It's his struggle with himself. It wasn't a struggle with God. He's struggling with himself. If you read the Psalms, you'll see that it's him.
Yeah, and it always ends with, "But you're God, and you got it." Yes.
So, people don't say God for a number of reasons. They want to be able to honor Mother Earth. That's great. You can stick your feet in water, you can hug trees, you can hug animals, you can go sit in the sweat lodge for 6 hours and claim that you're Native American, when you're as white can be. But, ultimately, the earth didn't create us. It didn't. The only thing that created us created the earth. And so energetically, if we praise Mother Earth, it's an entity, but it's not an entity that can sustain our souls because it didn't create us. So when you intellectually understand that you can only receive energy and honor that thing, like your mother, right? Your father didn't squeeze you out of his nuts. He contributed, but it's your mother that co-created you. Right? So you have to honor her for that. Well, it's our Father, ultimately. And it created us. So it's wonderful to be respectful of the environment and honor the sea and deer and talk to animals. That's all great. But they didn't create you. And the more you understand the importance of that, or humanity understands the importance of that, they'll stop trying to be Native American or Peruvian and eat ayahuasca and sit in the sweat lodges and do all this other bullshit that has absolutely no value, zero. If it did, those people that practice that, they would be well. They're not.
So I think you said it's one, but everything is an expression of it, and its expression of it is interacting with itself.
It's levels of expression. I loved my Native American chief, Howard Badhand. I lived in New Mexico. I did 27 sweat lodges. I sat with him. He's a medium. He's a former Harvard professor of Native American studies. I met 4 major medicine men. I treated them all. I hung out with them. I really get it. But they're still living in squalor. They live in mud huts. Their roofs are constantly collapsing. They're poor. They have no teeth. They're substance abusers. They have no life whatsoever. And the white man's not to blame. They have a choice. They can get up and do something about it. And yet they constantly continue complaining and blaming and accusing and allowing the white man to come into their territories and build casinos and substance abuse and do all this other crap that destroys their populations. They can't. It's 2021. They're still living in mud huts.
Michael Lightman, a Kabbalistic master, says that when he was asked what's the secret to happiness, he says, I try and live in harmony with nature. And I think this is something that's really misunderstood. Nature is.
I went to a Michael Lightman retreat.
Okay.
It was a disaster.
Okay.
A fucking disaster. I've never seen more bullshit in my life. I've never encountered. I've gone to Landmark Forum, hung out with Native Americans, Peruvians, name it. And it's 25 years of this, and I've met the best of the best and the worst of the worst. Michael Lightman might be a brilliant man, but his retreat and his way of teaching people is ludicrous.
Would you like to elaborate on why you think it's ludicrous, or?
Yeah, it's like a kumbaya love circle. They sit in this. I went to Pennsylvania with my ex, and her parents are big followers of Michael Lightman. It was just incredible. It was just incredibly mediocre. It was like a kumbaya AA meeting.
Okay, and the reason I mentioned that because I think a lot of traditions understand that nature is an expression of God, right? So the laws of nature are kind of the expression of God's laws or the universal principles or whatnot. So if when he says, my secret to my happiness is being incongruent with nature, I think maybe he's afraid of saying because of congruent with God, because nature is much less conflictive word. But at the end of the day, nature is an expression of God. Like this earth or Mother Earth is an expression of it. You said everything is an expression of it. But when we look past the expression, I think that's where you're coming from more. So, right? Like the at the highest level, everything is only God. But there are different
Even
expressions.
at the lowest level, everything is God.
Well, yeah. But there is an illusion of different expressions of it that are interacting with each other and like interweaving and creating this reality that's an illusion of there's something besides God, right? Like your beard, at the end of the day, is God, but I'm looking at your beard and it's an illusion of your beard, but it's still created in an expression of God. I don't know well, that's. I love the fact that you always cut past like all the BS and say, yeah.
Because I'm not interested, the disservice that spiritual theorist, he's a theorist. He studied a book, the Zohar. He's not an enlightened Rebbe like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's not an enlightened person. He just studied a bunch of information and made his own deduction. He's never seen the other side. He's never healed anybody. He doesn't know how to. It's all scientifically based. Anybody that I met in Lightman's circle, they were all either doctors or recovering junkies. So, which basically meant to me that they're physical, material people that needed an altered 12-step meeting. They sat in a circle and told each other they love each other. Please, man. There are people out there that in my community that walk through walls. They got themselves to such a point in the human experience that they can merge through walls, but they didn't lead with that. They only lead with the fact that they're connected to the creative force. I asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe when I saw him in spirit, Menachem Schneerson. I asked him, is it an achievement to be realized? He said, no, it's not an achievement to be realized. The achievement is being realized and living with the confines of a structure and boundaries. So teaching people how to effectively use their minds to achieve success in business makes you self-made. You tap out of you use up your personal energy if you don't insinuate that ultimately it all comes from God. You have to say it. If you tell me how great, people always tell, oh, this was great. Your healing was great. I didn't do anything. I'm nobody. That's why I make it simple and practical. I'm not interested. I want to be able to find people, and I want to align myself to people that are not interested in bullshit, that are realistic, practical people who really get it and love it as much as I do. I don't believe in God. I know God.
Yeah, it's a personal experience, relationship. I do think, Alex, to your point, the idea of like I live in alignment with nature is kind of this. It does do a disservice, because when people hear that, they're thinking, oh, I like whatever, am in a field of flowers or whatever, when in reality nature is just brutal, like brutal as fuck, you know. I mean, it's like very like there's predatory behavior in nature. It's just this like that whole realm of spiritualism, of like worshiping the earth, bowing to the earth or whatever, is just such a one-sided view of that reality. I do think it is just, it does, you're right, Vlad, like it does do a disservice to humanity to present spiritual elevated spiritual practices in that context.
Are people that cannot eat. Like, yes, our body needs substance, needs food, because at the end of the day, and the earth grows the food, or allows there to be life on earth so we can eat it. But there are people that have gone past that, where they're only receiving like connection and this nourishment from God, that don't need food and water. There are a lot of examples of yogis, of spiritual people that have gone weeks, months, and years without eating, and they're okay. And I think it's because they're being nourished by God, by this profound light that is everything. What do you think of that, Vlad, so we can start wrapping this up?
I did an 11-day fast with just water. I had more energy and I was more effective in my practice than I had ever been, because my stomach wasn't busy digesting. I drank water with potassium and salt, which my wife created. So she introduced me to it. And we ran 4 miles a day and did an hour and a half of yoga every day in the fast. I never felt better. I didn't need food. It's another illusion that we're sustained by. And I wanted to do it because I came from the Soviet Union, and my ex-wife used to complain to Jerry Epstein and say, this guy goes to the supermarket and buys 30 apples. And Jerry'd say, do you know where he comes from? He comes from a place where today there's apples and then there's no apples for 4 months. So what do you want? I really had deprivation mentality. I needed food, and I needed to know that I can always get food. And for most of my practice, and probably for the last 35 years, I spent my reality spent around food, not just my practice and training and yoga and all that. It's the majority of the time is always based on where I'm going to eat next. And when I finally did this fast, I did 4 days, I drank coffee, and then I decided I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to do another 7 days with nothing, just water. And it was the most incredible time. I mean, I was so plugged in. I can't even describe it. I lost 15 pounds, but it was incredible. You're sustained by the light.
the thing that most have done on a Vision Quest was 4 days without food or water. And it does, well, first, when you go back to it, like the first time that water touches your lips, you've never been more thankful for that ever. It's like, it brings you to tears, just drinking water.
I didn't do a dry fast. You did a dry fast before.
Yeah.
No, I didn't do a dry fast. I've done maybe 30 hours the most.
I was surprised by the pain in my mouth.
Really?
And when you eat again after like an extended fast, it was this weird, like, I kept being like, what is wrong with, like, what's in my food that my mouth is like stinging or
Oh
something?
no, the pain in your throat when you swallow for the first time. It's like, oh God, yeah, dry fast. So
I'm sorry, did we go off track about relationships?
yeah, we went from relationships to just speaking about God and the nature of the universe. But that's fine. We can title this Relationships and God, because the first 15 minutes we talked about relationships. But at the end of the day, I think there is some energetic congruence with like the main relationship you need to have is with God first, and then with yourself, and then with the other, and then with the community.
Yeah, how do you know you're equally yoked if you don't know your own soul and you don't have a relationship with the source of your soul, so you don't know your own soul? How could you ever possibly have a functional partner?
You choose it. I think what's happened, at least for me, I chose it by based on my sense of truth, and also how far am I willing to go? What am I willing to do? You know what I mean? You always have to ask yourself, okay, this makes sense, but how far am I willing to go? What am I willing to exclude out of my life? What are the impulses I'm willing to cut out of my life?
Oh yeah.
Based on that, you collect yourself.
Uh,
And while you're collecting yourself, you encounter people who also want to live on that vibrational state. I think you heard this story before about my mother when she went to pray on a holiday, and the rabbi was a simple Moroccan guy who said, today God is going to decide how much money you're going to make next year. And she called me and said, "Wow, when are you going to start teaching your version, realized version of Judaism?" I said, "Why do you say that?" I said, "Well, it just sounds so mediocre and small-minded." I said, "Why do you think you encounter?" Remember, we encounter teachers, partners, life partners. Everything is based on our level of understanding. And so I said, "Why do you think you encountered this guy on the holiest day of the year, when the light of the creative force shines 1,000 degrees brighter? You encountered this guy who's mediocre according to you." And my mother is bright and sensitive and smart and knows a lot of information. And she said, "I don't know. Why do you think?" It's simple. You can know a lot, but if you don't practice and actually have a practice that sustains your level, your vibration, you encounter a partner, a teacher, based on your vibrational level and based on how far you're willing to go.
So you said that the type of partner you have, or the situation you have with your partner, is a reflection or is an expression of who you are. Yeah. For example, me and Whitney, for example, my wife isn't living with me 100% of the time right now, right? And Whitney, her husband, travels a lot. What do you think that says about us, the fact that we are married or within a committed relationship and that our partner isn't there all the time? What do you think that's a reflection of us?
You sure you want me to answer this in a public forum?
Well, I don't know. I'm okay with you answer about me. I don't know if Whitney's okay with that.
She's laughing because she knows what's coming. Alex, for you personally, I think you chose you're unavailable, so your wife is unavailable. If you're okay with that, and whether you are or you're not, doesn't really matter. You asked me, so I'm answering. I wouldn't volunteer this kind of information unless you give me permission. So because you're unavailable emotionally, you're super intelligent, really bright, and love intellectual masturbation. But emotionally, you're not present for her. So she's not there. She's absent. She's somewhere else. Like you're somewhere else. You have to have space in your heart to have your significant other to be next to you, and to be next to you and be intertwined based on a common denominator and common mutual respect. As for Whitney, it's very hard for Whitney to nourish two children. She always picks men that she has to nourish like children. It's because she wasn't made important, she wasn't nurtured, and she didn't learn from her mother how to nurture herself. So she picks men that don't nurture her, and they're also unavailable. So she ends up being the nurturer and the mommy. So when Whitney decides she doesn't want to be a mommy anymore, she'll be fine. And when you decide that you want to be present, you don't want to talk about spirituality, you really want to be that what you're talking about, then you'll have your wife in your life, because that's your girl.
I do think right now that this is part of what is happening, is that I realized, like, okay, like I have an infant now, you know? So I do think that is like, I was talking to my husband this morning, which I have told him, like, hey, do you mind if I share our, like, talk about us on, I just want to clarify that I've gotten the okay to share experiences. But I said to him, you know, I think once you realize, like, once you accept that you can't be like, that you don't want to behave a certain way anymore, you'll be back home. But like, your trips keep getting extended and extended and extended because you don't want to deal with how it is in the house. And that is like a firm thing now, because we have an infant and it has to be that way, you know? So I do think that this is like a period of time where harsh feeling boundaries are getting set. But I was also thinking today, like, you know, he's not bad. He's a great dad when he's here. He's an amazing father. He's a super supportive partner. Everything that I do, he's just like so excited for what I'm doing. I've never had a partner like that, you know, that can support and be emotionally
I'm sorry, I have to
observant. Yeah.
I love Mike, you know that. But it's easy to be that intermittently. It's easy to come back and put on the show. Try being that shit every day.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know.
Without the show, and being there and being consistent about it.
I asked him the other day. I said, you don't want to come home because it's intense here.
All right. So
I mean, you have to do it all the time.
Right. It's not a show.
Yeah.
It's easy to come back for a weekend or a week and put on a great show. Huh? You're so great. Oh my God. But why don't you come back when I'm not so great? When I'm out of my fucking mind, losing my mind in the middle of the night, this kid's draining the juice out of me, and there's no one to tell.
Yeah.
I live in like that.
It's funny. Yeah. But I was thinking about how when I selected this partner, Michael, I had said, okay, I want a person of a certain intellectual temperament. I would prefer a person with like a nervous cast. Like I had known him for a decade and never even considered any kind of situation like that with him. And I made this list, and then I ran into him, you know, and I was looking at him and I was like, holy shit, like he's all of these things that I requested. I requested a person with these tendencies. So am I going to be upset about it? I can't be upset about it. I have to accept like the good and the bad and just, you know, understand where we are right now.
A lot of people don't know what a nervous cast is. I mean, there's 4 temperaments, and sometimes they're called casts. And nervous people are very quick-minded, and well, they tend to get nervous. To clarify,
like he doesn't have a full what you call nervous intellect, like Vlad. He has like a different intellect, but he has a slight nervous cast. So he's just like very quick, but he's also very small framed. So there's just not a lot holding him down. You know, I mean, I don't know. What I'm saying is like, regardless of where we're at right now, I selected him.
And I think we should do like an episode soon on morphology, on understanding the 4 temperaments or the 4 castes, because I think that's a language that all 3 of us, and I think Maddie's familiar with as well. So we understand like each of the difficulties and the tendencies of.
Maddie familiar? Was she a student or resident?
she's read some of his stuff, but also from astrology, from the 4 elements, which are very similar. So I think we should do an episode on that, so we understand like the difficulties that each temperament has and the BS that each temperament will pull.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to go off on like a whole
No,
thing, but
that's fine. That's beautiful. Well, is there any closing comments either of you two have?
thanks, Vlad.
Thank you for calling out on our bullshit. I love these meetings that we receive from you.
Look, that's not my intention here, but if you're interested, at some point I thought maybe we should open, like, when this becomes a podcast, we can allow people to call in and ask these questions, right?
Yeah. We do put this up on Spotify, but I think that's an awesome thing. You know what? Let's go ahead and do that. Let's remind people at the beginning of each episode to at least email and call in on questions, so other people get called in on their BS as well, not only me and Whitney. So what information do you need in order to connect with them? Just their name and their question, or?
Question and their name.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and create an email account, and I'll put the email in the comments below, so people can call in with their questions and their names, and you can, because just Vlad knows a little bit about me, but when I ask him the question, I think he connects and he receives like the circumstance, the situation, the surroundings, everything that's happening from source, from God. Is that true? Or what's your process like when we ask you a question?
When you ask me a question, when we interact, I'm standing in everything that you want, meaning I don't get incremental tidbits of information. I'm with you, meaning if you ask me what you did last summer, I know what you did last summer. So my point is, I'm not here to flag my, my abilities. The point is that I understand the dynamic between you and your wife. I also understand what you lead with. So based on what you lead with, I understand what's happening in your relationship. When you look at things in a realized way, basically, I know Whitney, but I'm not there every day with her and Mikey, but I know who she is. And frankly, his presence gets in her way. So that's why his trips are longer. She's organized.
Dude, it's true. Whenever
she's organized, she's methodical, she's a mom, she can hold down the job, she can teach, learn, do all the shit by herself. Him being around and doing whatever it is that he does just gets in her way. That's why he's away.
Whenever I'm home by myself, baby's in bed by 8 o'clock. Whenever he's here, I'm like, what the fuck is 11 o'clock right now? What have you done to me?
Understand? So I understand Whitney and how she functions. I also understand you. So when a person calls in, I don't need to know them. I'm aligned to who they are. They'll get what they'll get. Not everybody's open to the truth. They want to know what Akashic file they can align themselves to.
I love your face when you said that. That's just
Akashic files. That's my next episode.
So beautiful, guys. Thank you, Vlad, for joining us. This has been Esoteric Psi, the institution podcast where we increase the consciousness of our community and strengthen them through starting a dialogue about esoteric wisdom, spirituality, psychology in a practical way, so you guys can apply it in your everyday life. So I think the takeaway from this is work on yourself and your connection with God, and that your partner will reflect that as well. Express.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Can you stop?